Hello and welcome to CharitEpulse, your regular update on news and happenings in the charity sector. I'm James Saunders. I'm partner at Moore Kingston Smith, and I'm joined as ever by my co-hosts Catherine Rastomji, partner and head of charities at Shakespeare Martineau, Charles Mesquita, charities director at Quilter Cheviot. You may be listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube or any of our respective organisations' websites. However you're listening, you're very welcome. Please don't forget to like or follow and subscribe and generally hit any positive feedback buttons you can find for us, presuming, of course, that you do find our little sessions useful. I've got a few topics to cover this week, so we're going to dive straight in. The first one is charities using artificial intelligence, AI, more are likely to have higher fundraising, some research finds. This is generally, this is quite interesting, this research. It's the status of UK fundraising by Blackbaud, a software provider. The bald facts are quite interesting, but furthermore, they do say that a majority of people use it to create social media content rather than necessarily use the predictive AI type work for their own purposes. And they do also say that the biggest concerns, actually, the higher numbers of people that talk about concerns, misinformation, data security, reputational risk, really big concerns for some of these respondents. So it's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword, really, this one. And Catherine, you have got a slightly different slant on this, haven't you, on the use of AI?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we are seeing a lot of, I don't know whether it's promotion of AI usage by charities, but it is, being covered a lot. And I think some charities are considering using it. The context I came across it was with a group that had applied to the Charity Commission for registration of a new charity, and they had used AI to generate some of the responses to the questions raised in the registration application. And it seems to me the Charity Commission spotted it straight away and were very clear that they do not accept applications that have been written by AI. So I thought, actually, we do need to be a bit cautious about, it might seem, oh, that's great, it'll generate answers to awkward questions, but actually, will it be accepted, and is it always appropriate in different contexts, I think?
And you've got to wonder how quickly people will start to look at this stuff on, if it goes out on social media. There might well be a question like with images. Has this content been created by AI, and therefore the charity sort of genuineness is getting called into question? So that's an interesting slant to it. Charles, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think it's like all these things. It's a bit of Wild West at the moment, isn't it? I mean, I remember about 6 months ago, my 21-year-old son, having gone to stay with his grandparents, sent an email which had been generated by AI, and my father-in-law, who is in his mid-80s, didn't cotton on to begin with, and thought it was fantastic that his grandson had actually written a thank you letter, which he wasn't very good at. But when he did, he then sent back a response in AI. So I don't think this is a generational thing. I think, like all things with charity trustees in any sphere, this is really new stuff, and one can spend an awful lot of time fearing what the dangers are, and not necessarily working on the opportunities. So I think one has to be curious and has to have an open mind, and I think there is phenomenal potential here, but we don't necessarily know what that might be to begin with, and I suspect we've got to experiment and not be fearful of failing. I have to say I'm glued at the moment to the US general election, and there's quite a lot of rhetoric around AI, particularly generating crowds and stuff like that. But I think watching other mediums and seeing how they're doing and then transporting it back into your organizations is quite a useful thing. How they demonstrate it for increasing fundraising, I don't know. But the one thing that does appear to be the case with a lot of social media is that you do get a big advantage being first mover, and adopting it early. So I think people should be prepared to experiment and see where it takes them.
Yeah, I have a feeling that the stats are rather, they are using more AI and they get more money rather than it's because of. And I think that's probably a bit of a, that link hasn't been forced or made there between, it's definitely come from using AI. So
I mean, James, I think one thing that's quite interesting, we've seen quite a few organisations, which the Race Equality Foundation, I think, was the first to come out and say they're not going to use X, or which was formerly Twitter, because of the disinformation on that. I do slightly wonder whether AI will be used as a tool to identify correct information. And actually use in a reverse way at the moment, which people are using it as disinformation or potentially using it as disinformation.
We'll all have to check out Catherine's TikTok and see what's going
Good luck
on
with
there.
that. Yeah.
Second story, this is the Charity Aid Foundation reporting that the UK has fallen out of the habit of giving both time and money as it drops out of the top 20 most generous countries in the most recent assessment World Giving Index. Interesting, really. Only the second time in 15 years, I think, that it's outside the countries outside the top 20. It does seem rather to reflect one of the points that we made a few weeks ago, Catherine, actually, wasn't it? That perhaps the amount of money being raised is increasing, but the number of people doing so is decreasing. And I think that's what this has said. 67% of people in the UK said they donated to charity in the past month, down from 71% at the equivalent time last year. And they're saying that the reduction in numbers donating is key to this world, one of the elements of this World Giving Index. But the actual total amounts are going up. So it does seem that a smaller number of quite high, maybe these high net worth individuals or wealthy people are giving larger individual amounts, which it reflects what we've seen, I think, doesn't it?
I think it does. And I also wonder whether it's the donors as well who are being a bit more focused maybe on the causes they want to support and giving more money to those causes. Whereas I do wonder in years gone by whether it would be more scattergun and you would just react to whichever charity is asking you and give, an amount to all of them, but a smaller amount. So I think sometimes I struggle to see whether there is a theme overall and whether you can extrapolate from some of this information. I know it said 145,000 people, but it was from 142 countries. And then I start to think, I don't know how many of those people were in the UK or know about the UK, and quite how it's all pieces together seemed a bit uncertain.
I wonder if the mysterious donations that we covered a few weeks ago, anonymous donations, I wonder if whoever gave that ticked the boxes as giving. Charles, any thoughts at all?
Well, I'm not sure how helpful it is sort of comparing one country to another, because I wonder whether I suspect there is a very close correlation to the welfare state versus how much people give to charity. But you've also got a number of factors, haven't you? You've got cost of living crisis. I mean, I wonder what's happening between the generations and attitude towards. Plus, we've had, a number of scandals in the charity sector and a relatively negative press and politicians. Plus, you've got the Commission coming out and doing, as we discussed in previous occasions, about confidence in the sector. And I just think this does fundamentally undermine people's faith in it. And what would be nice with these reports is if there was something that was a bit more analytical that actually bore into what was going on, so that we could actually then address those issues rather than being more generic and looking at it on a global basis.
Okay. Charles, staying with you, the Charity Commission updates its decision-making guidance, that is CC27. It's made it even shorter than the 24 minutes it estimated it took for the last version. Now it's only 12 minutes to read. Updated guidance, it says it's updated from 13 years ago, so it probably needed looking at. But the key thing that the Charity Commission said was that they want the guidance to be shorter. We heard that the length and style of our older guidance can put some people off. Only 26% of trustees use Commission guidance more often than other sources. So, there is an issue there. Is this the right way to go about solving it, Charles?
Well, I have to say I did print it out and try and read it on the train and see if I could do it in 12 minutes. I was sort of struggling to not to get distracted in reading it. I mean, it's a very good piece of guidance, but it does state the obvious. I think your point is more so that the Commission is concerned about how few trustees read it. But generally, I don't know, Catherine will have better experience with this on talking to charities on a governance perspective. But because it is quite practical and common sense, how many trustees actually need to read it. And I also wonder whether, because they have these short videos, don't they, of which they've done, which have been very effective. And I do slightly think we may have moved on for the way people absorb information. I happened to be looking at a chart this morning, and YouTube now tops in the US, admittedly not here, but the number of hours that the average person watches, which is way above Disney and Netflix and everything else, which I thought was quite an interesting thought process. So I suspect what the Commission probably needs to do is actually look at the way that it produces its guidance, and written form, possibly, even if it moves from 25 to 12 minutes, is not necessarily the most effective way to get the message across.
I mean, they're still focusing, aren't they, on those 7 core principles of governance, which I think is it ties in with how they've been approaching this matter recently. Really stress to trustees what the basis of their assessment should be, how they should get to those decision makers. Very much, these are the principles. It's over to you, rather than try and enforce a straitjacket on anyone. Catherine, is that fair?
I think so. I think, and 7 seems to be the magic number, isn't it? So Magnificent 7 for these principles and Magnificent 7 for the Charity Governance Code. But I did wonder about, can an adult not read for 24 minutes rather than got to get that below X amount? So I think it was focusing on the one thing to focus on the length. And I do wonder about when the Charity Commission's website, previous to their update, in my view, was much better to be able to find the guidance you're looking for. And then we have an update, and actually the number of my clients who say, well, the index isn't there, it's harder to find what it is you're looking for. So maybe that accounts for why people are not actually reading the guidance, because they can't find it in the first place. So I'd go for a much more basic, signpost people more easily as they had before, rather than update another Gov UK website.
Good. Okay. Thanks for that. Yeah. I mean, there's also, so I've got 2 stories that are kind of interlinked, really. The Charity Retail Association, brilliant organisation, CRA, were quoted as saying that post-pandemic volunteering decline at charity shops may never recover. So they're pointing to charity shops really struggling to get volunteers in. A significant shift in volunteering landscape is the phrase. So volunteering workforce of 220,000 has fallen to around 186,000 now. They were talking about particularly the quality of donations declining, and pointing to influence of fast fashion and overproduction of cheap clothing, that sort of thing. So some really interesting insights into charity shops. At the same time, there was also another story in civil society about hospice charities, 2 hospice charities opening the largest shops they have to date. So St Luke's Hospice in particular in Sheffield, opening what is effectively a charity department store, 8,500 square feet of shop, the charity's most ambitious project to date, it said. So this is like, and I suppose what it might be doing is it might be pointing to the charities, professionalizing, if not quite professional, but moving away from volunteers in stores and making it a proper a commercial retail operation. I wonder if that sort of chimes with what you're seeing at the moment, Catherine?
I think so too. I thought if it's to do with volunteers, I think it's because the nature of the volunteers wanted has changed. I think we've had a shift from, the well-meaning, someone who's got time on their hands but really doesn't know how to dress a shop window. And if you watch Mary Portas, and she talk about this is how you get people into your charity shop, and it's got to be appealing. So I think we're seeing more of a move towards that. And also I think tapping into whether it's Gen Z or whatever number letter we're up to, but people wanting deliberately to buy pre-loved goods. So we don't have to be so concerned about fast fashion, because people are choosing to shop in this way, and it's a kind of changing face of retail, perhaps.
So we have an office in Red Hill, and the shopping centre in Red Hill, the main department store, which I won't name, has just moved out. And clearly that is a real kick to that shopping centre, because the footfall so this move for a hospice charity to move into a charity department store might well be a reflection of those, those established department stores now moving out of town centres and onto retail parks. Charles, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a long argument, hasn't there, between shops selling goods and charities buying things that are new to sell, and then charities not having to pay or paying only a reduced rate of business rate versus the commerciality of shops, and I think that is a problem. But what I was thinking about was more on the fast fashion. You get a lot of charities thinking from an investment perspective about investing in companies that are effectively, from the waste point of view, of encouraging people to buy and throw away. And then you, of course, on the other element of it, they might not want to do it from their investments, but they're happy to accept it from into their charity shops and the recycling. I was going to call it upcycling. I don't think it is upcycling, but so I think that creates its own quandary, of which is I haven't quite got my head around what I think about that. I mean, there's no doubt, because I suppose the other alternative with all these clothes is they then get dumped in third world countries, which is also equally damaging from that basis. And perhaps we should buy less, consume less, and have less to give and better quality.
Yeah, there is definitely a focus on reuse rather than recycle. That's shown in one of those. I think that's the Charity Retail Association say that should be a focus as well. Don't just give these lower quality goods over to charity shops and think that they're going to be recycled. They should be reused. So yeah, that's something that's ongoing. Final point for this session: the FCA is continuing its battle with the banks over charities' difficulties in dealing with them. So there has been a report now, and we've covered this extensively over a good couple of years, if not more than that. So they had a roundtable with banks and charity representatives, discussed the issues. The CFG were there, Charity Finance Group, reporting that the FCA understands, but at the moment there's not an awful lot that can be done without the banks really buying into it, I don't think. Is that, Catherine, is that sort of the feeling you got from this?
I think so. I mean, I think the obstacle is the banks, and it just makes me hopping mad, some of the comments that come out of this. So one of the quotes here said, that it was difficult for the banks because charities have, quote, complex governance structures. For instance, a charity that has more than 100 trustees. Well, in 24 years, I have never come across a charity that has anywhere near that amount. I think 27 trustees is my top. So this then gets spouted as if that's typical, and the banks get to say, yeah, they're really difficult to have as customers. That's why we don't want them. And I just think that can't be an option. So I think there just needs to be more pressure on the banks to say, get on board. Charities are part of society and they are entitled to banking.
That was a very strange example to use, and clearly, as you intimate, an extreme case. That's not what a huge number of charities are facing. That an awful lot say, well, the moment you've got an overseas trustee, the banks run a mile. I mean, that's more realistic, isn't it? I mean, that's going to be normal for most for an awful lot of charities. Charles, is it fair?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely. I mean, I don't think I've ever come across a charity with 100 trustees, 50 or 25 trustees. So I think, yeah, that was a bizarre thing for them to do. I mean, it's great that the Charity Commission have got on board, and the FCA and CFG. There's no doubt about it that the sector was finding it difficult from a banking point of view. For most things, although I think what the banking sector hasn't really explained is what the real issues are for them, and I wonder how much of it is reputational risk. So if a charity goes wrong and they have to be commercial, do they want that reputational risk? Is that, how much of a risk is that? And then of course you've got the whole issue around overseas payments. So any charity that's dealing overseas, which does create its complexity. But I think what would be really helpful is actually for somebody just to be upfront and honest about what the issues are from a banking sector, and see if the sector can address it. Because I still sit here bemused that they're quite happy to provide it for private individuals, supposedly at no cost, although there is a cost, obviously. But things, and I agree with Catherine. I mean, the structures aren't that complex. I mean, there are about 3 different ways a charity can be constituted, and okay, fine, you've got trustees are changing, but even that can be dealt with. So, yeah, I don't think these are things that are insurmountable. But I think the banking industry probably needs to be a little bit more honest about why, if it doesn't want to do business, why it doesn't want to do business.
Okay, thank you both. That's probably all we've got time for this week. We've covered an awful lot of ground there. So thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Charles. And thank you to listeners for tuning in to this episode of Charity Pulse. We hope you found that discussion insightful. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please do let us know. And whether you're a charity professional, a passionate volunteer, or simply someone who cares about making a difference, we aim to ensure there's something here for you. So don't forget to please follow us, leave a review, share our podcast with your network, and join us next time as we continue to explore the challenges and the opportunities facing charities, non-profits and voluntary organisations. Bye-bye for now.